Nice to be here, and thank you very much. This is Arts Admin. First thing I would say, it's the most terrible name. It's all my fault. I chose it in 1979. In those days, producers in England were people in the West End and commercial theatres. So we called ourselves administrators. Somebody suggested we should have a strap line, so Arts Admin, much more interesting than its name implies. But I'll tell you a little bit about it. And these are sort of work we do. We work with contemporary artists, as we all do here, and right across all artistic disciplines. And as of now, we've staffed about 25 people. We've been going since 1979. And yes, I'm pressing the right button. Again, we make work for theatres, for galleries, indoors, outdoors, site-specific. We do tours, less and less actually these days, and more site-specific one-off events. We work locally around the corner in East London, we work nationally and internationally, and we work with solo performers and with companies. And every project is entirely different. There is something that connects them all, but they're all quite different in terms of their aesthetic and their scale and everything else. Whoops, I'm going backwards. So 1979 we began, I think in response to two things. One is there was a growth of independent artists in Britain at the time, very exciting work that had very little support and very different chance to continuity, and we thought we would provide a base for those companies. This was also Margaret Thatcher's Britain, so arts funding was very low. We've gone back to that now, so that's quite well we're useful. And we give support to those companies when they really need it, and very quickly. It took a long time to get us funded, but we now have our own funding, we now have our own building, and we have an advisory service for young artists and a bursary scheme. So the idea is to give time and space to artists as well as doing the producing. So it's sort of grown organically over the years, and really, though we're not artist-led, we've tried to respond to what we've seen and perceived that the artists need. These are the words we try and adhere to. We try and work in cooperation a lot, in collaboration a lot. We try and be loyal. We'll stick with the artist as much as we can, through ups and downs. Flexibility is the biggest thing, because it's always impossible to just keep everything going. Resilience is important, and we briefly talked about environment, but green as well. So what we do for the artists is work with them from the very beginning of the idea. So really from the very beginning of the idea, they come with us with their project they want to do, and we do all the work for that project. So every artist has a unique relationship with us, depending on what their work is, and we do everything for them: finance, management, marketing, but most importantly talking to them about the projects that they want to do, and profile raising. And I think there is a sense of there's something about the togetherness of the organisation which just gives them a bit of strength that they might not have. We apply for all funding for them all completely separately, though we're funded ourselves. We're not funded to produce their work in a similar way to Camp Novel. So every project we have to apply for. So we spent similarly a lot of time writing grant applications, and most of the artists are funded project by project. They all have separate accounts and separate bank accounts. We don't sort of keep them all into one umbrella. Our own turnover is about 1 million now because of the building, just over £1 million. Pounds, yeah, sorry, I'm not into, we're still into pounds. There's a few images, I'm not going to talk about any of the work, I've got quite a few images of projects here, but there's some information over there if you're interested afterwards, and you can ask me if there's anything. But what is interesting is we've talked about many more artists wanting to work with participation, with non-artists, and making projects with other people, and so I'm just going to flick through some of the pictures. So why this model? I suppose it works for people who want to work out of the traditional pattern, and I think for us, again, when we began, the pattern used to be to make a piece of theatre and to book it on a tour and to finish the tour and then make another piece of work and do that. And I think what's happened is artists are wanting to work in different ways. They're wanting to travel but stay in a place longer. They're wanting to have a deeper relationship with wherever they are, whether it's in the UK or abroad, rather than doing this one-off. And for me, that's much more interesting. Many of them want to respond to the political situation. Many of them want to respond to working with local people or context in which they're performing. Many of them are site-specific. and many of them also don't work as a team always with the same group of artists. They might work with those artists one day and those another for another project. So again, that's the flexibility of how it works. Some of the projects that I've just put this one in because this one came to Copenhagen. I don't know if you ever saw this, Dominoes, but this is a city-wide row of breeze blocks that runs to the city for about 2 or 3 kilometres. We had a triumph in Copenhagen not very long ago, didn't we, Trevor? There we are. This is your one. This one is in Marseille. And why this is an interesting one for me, and the next one as well, Graham Miller's project, is they both began as a one-off, and we did them just once, thinking, okay, God, that was exhausting, impossible project to do. We're so pleased we've got it on, it's happened, and it's finished. But actually, Dominoes, and the one I'm going to talk about next briefly, is they both started like that, but then people saw them and they developed. And I really like that way of working, first of all, because you know what you've got, and you can then move it on to other places. This was a tiny project we did with an artist called Graham Miller, where the audience lied back and look at the world from another direction. This was in a park in South London just for one afternoon on a minuscule budget, but subsequently they've taken to all sorts of urban and rural places as well, and keeps touring. So why this model? I guess it works. I mean, financially it works a bit because we can provide things. We don't charge for the artists unless the project comes off. So we might work for a very long time not earning any money. It offers, we can obviously, the most obvious thing is sharing resources, sharing expertise in the office. Nobody knows everything, but between us, somebody knows, all of us somebody will know the answer. It's responding to new ways of the way the artists are working, and it's giving them a bit of a sense of inclusion and artistic identity. We found a building by accident, so it's far too long a story to explain here. But in 1994, we moved into it. I think it was an empty building. And we got some funding from the UK and from Europe to buy the lease of it. So you could fit about 20 of them into Camp Nagel. But for us, it's sort of perfect. And it's got rehearsal spaces, it's got a theatre, and it's got office spaces for other arts organisations. So it's become a bit of a hub, as they like to call it in Britain. These are just pictures of the building. It's got a cafe, which is also really, really important because everybody meets and it's a sort of central meeting place. And because of the building, we were able to really increase what we do. So before we found the building, we were producers of the projects. After we found the building, we had space. We could provide bursaries for artists, as I said. We started an advisory service for artists that was free, training programs, mentoring, labs, workshops, because suddenly we had space to offer as well as tiny pots of money, residences and associate relationships with some artists. We also send out an e-digest once a week, which is just full of information for artists to find commissions. I'm always amazed how useful that is. It goes to about 20,000 people now, and we put onto it all sorts of opportunities for artists. And we have an education program working with 18 to 25-year-olds. And they do a summer lab every year, and a lot of work in local schools. And we also run, together with another organisation, a project called Unlimited, which our Arts Council gave quite a substantial amount of money to encourage and commission disabled artists. So though we're not producing the work of those artists, we're sort of managing the scheme for the Arts Council. And that's the beginning of a long important initiative, I think, in Britain. List of current artists we're working with is there. I'm literally flicking through these because there isn't time to talk to you about them, but it might just give you a clue, sort of the diversity and the different types of artists that we're working with. Sometimes in galleries, indeed, sometimes in a car, there's sometimes in the Arctic, film. This is a lovely project called Nail Wraps about feminism. And this was a project in Derry, a very, very split city in Northern Ireland between Catholic and Protestant with children. Rosemary Lee, an artist who works with lots and lots of participants. This was on the beaches in dawn, again with local singers and crazy people who go swimming at dawn in England. They were part of this project too. Some telematic projects by a company called Station House. opera. Internationally, it's been really important to us from the very beginning. England is very isolated. It still doesn't feel to me like we're in proper Europe, and actually if our right-wing politicians have their way, we might not be for much longer. But it's been incredibly important to us because when I first started, this work that we were doing was taken very much more seriously in Europe, I think, in Europe, your Europe. And it wasn't considered sort of fringe, and because we've got such a tradition of text-based work. So Mickery in Amsterdam, some of you have heard of, is no longer there, sadly, but that was a gateway for us and many of our projects into the rest of Europe. And now we do work a lot internationally, indeed with lots of schemes. The British Council are quite helpful to us. And again, as I said, we're working in a different way. We're doing less of the touring and more of the long term. We're involved in 3 EU projects. This one called Bamboo was commissioning work for children. So this project by Tim Spooner was made for tiny 3-year-olds. Then another one, Create to Connect, and these are all the partners in that. And again, that's work that's seen in different places. Some of it's participatory work, and these are all the partners for that one. That's ongoing. And then the one that Uta mentioned, Imagine 2020, which has been the longest. This is our 3rd round now of funding. And again, you can see by these partners here, we're all very different in scale, in types of organisation. There's festivals, there's Camp Nagel, there's Kai Theatre, there's Bunker in Ljubljana. So we don't do big co-productions that go between because we're all very different. But the one thing that does unite us all is the values and the work about presenting work about the environment, which we all see incredibly important. And this is why we do it, because of the passion about doing something about this. And we were really quite surprised they gave us the funding for a third year running. So maybe the values did count a bit in the EU. I'm hopeful to think they did care about them. And we all commission work, and we all do it in different ways. And for us, for Arts Admin, we do a festival every 2 years called 2 Degrees. And we also commission other projects. And these are some of the things we've done. Some of you might have heard of the Lab of Insurrectionary Imagination. So we've got a variety of projects. A long time ago, 2 artists, Ackroyd and Harvey, this was before our festival, covered the National Theatre Fly Tower in London with grass as a sort of big statement, and watered it every day until it was rather beautiful. This is a project that was made about an aeroplane that never flies. And another one about following the lost rivers of London. There's many of these, so again I'm flicking through these things. And then we commissioned an artist called Michael Pinsky. This had a mixed response because it was a beautiful blue neon around the 3 major monuments in London. Supposed to be depicting, if we didn't do something about climate change, where the water would go from. But we were told we wanted to get it in Trafalgar Square, but we were told we couldn't because it was an iconic monument. We said that's the very reason we wanted to put it there. But it did. I think they didn't want to put this idea that London could be flooded at some point. So they said no. But it was interesting. It was a beautiful project. And we're doing another show now that's touring at the moment called The Roadless Trip. And this is an artist called Amy Sharrocks who did a project collecting water from all over the world, bottles of water, which is a statement about the most precious liquids we have that people bring from all over the world, and indeed empty bottles where there is a drought, and bottles from floods, and so it's got a real environmental connection. There's lots of challenges, of course. It's how to manage the workload when every artist thinks their art, of course, rightly, is the most important. So they have to trust us. They really have to trust that we'll prioritise as much as we can. But it is very difficult because they are all important. There's never enough time. So prioritising is really important. Project funding is always difficult, of course, and often artistic compromises because they have brilliantly ambitious ideas, and sometimes we can't raise quite enough money. What point do you go ahead and don't you? These are all things we face every day. Indeed, encouraging venues to take new work that we don't know what it's yet going to be, and reaching wider audiences, not the usual suspects, because the usual suspects will come. There is an audience for this work, but it's really only work. Somebody said to me, radical work is only radical when it reaches out of its normal audience. And again, our art form boxes, I think that's improved a lot, but when we began Arts Admin, it was very much, is this theatre, is this dance, is this music? And I think in Britain, certainly that's changed. We always have this problem and debate as well about how to do less work and do it better, but we always fail. We always do too much work. The advantages are obvious because we share the resources, share the expertise, the networks are important, the costs are reduced, opportunities, the building, joint marketing profile, all those things are really important. But and allowing artists to create work within their timetable, I think that's also very important. They can make work when they feel they've got something to say, rather than feeling they have to stick to a schedule that sometimes the more formal funding system allows. So we can carry on working for them for a long period of time. They don't have to pay an independent producer on a daily rate or something like that. So it enables them to really think and plan and think how hard and what project they want to do. And so that it's I think that I don't think, somebody asked me once if we'd influenced the work. And I don't think we've influenced the work in any way, and I would hate to think that. But of course, we choose the artists we want to work with. But I think we have allowed them, and I think if anything, we've allowed them to choose and be a bit more ambitious and do things in their own time. And I think that's been really important for us. And I think for me, why this work is also important is we've tried to support the mavericks, we've tried to support the difficult ones, the unusual ones, and I think the influence they've had on the mainstream has been not just our artists, but all over, has been incredibly important. And you know, I've been doing this for very, very many years, and I can see real changes. So I think that's very positive. And our own funding, therefore, allows those artists to be more flexible. I'm talking a bit about... Did I get? Oh yes, I've talked about the. I'm talking a little bit about the. I'm rushing this so much. I'm so frightened of you, Trevor, that I'm leaving bits out. But never mind. There's a big fight in Britain at the moment about funding. We know that so many European countries have got cuts, and we're about to, we think, could be getting cuts of between 25 and 40%. So a lot of us have been, I don't think it'll be 40%, I sometimes think they frighten us by saying it's going to be 40%, and then we're pleased if it's 25, but 25 is terrible. I think there's a lot of us meet in this organisation called What Next for the Arts, which is really trying to raise the profile of the arts. And I think that's been really, really important, and having conversations with politicians indeed, but also, and also people who make policies, but more importantly, audiences and participants, because politicians won't respond to such an issue unless they think that the electorate will care about it. There was a big thing in Britain when they tried to privatise some forests, and there was a real outcry. And we all wondered in the arts, if they cut all the funding for the arts, would there be a similar outcry? And we all thought there wouldn't. So we thought we should do something about it. So we meet regularly. And what I love about this, it's not an organisation, it's sort of a movement. What I love about it is we have the Opera House, we have an independent artist, we have dance companies, we have across scale and across art form really pushing the case for the arts. And it's terribly important that we do that. I've rushed so much, I think I've finished under time, haven't I? 10 to 12, I can go back, I'm leaving you with these two quotes because I think we've talked briefly about politics, and for me more and more, and for the artists more and more, that's really become crucial. I don't know any artist now who wants to keep their work out of the political things. Doesn't mean they're making work like we used to have in the 80s with banners and saying this is happening, that's happening, but they're all making work in some sense about some issue, even if it's very gentle. And I think for me, you can't separate art and politics anymore, and I think artists are feeling that very much. And it's not something that we are, again, telling the artists to do, but it's something that they themselves are wanting to do, because I think they're looking across Europe and seeing what's going on. So there's many artists making projects indeed about asylum or about environment, about inequality, and working in local communities that I think we've touched on already. And for me, that's really, really important. The other fight we have in Britain as well at the moment is the arts are taking a much lesser role in schools and ordinary education. And I think if that goes, we're really in big trouble. And our politicians are saying arts degrees and arts subjects aren't any use for your careers, but actually, you know, if you get that story, then it's getting very serious, and schools are dropping them. Anyway, I just love this quote. I heard this, which is a writer called A.L. Kennedy, wondering why that the arts. She's sort of saying here. I won't read it to you. You can read it, but she's sort of saying the arts clearly are important to her, but they're clearly important to even people who want to get rid of them, because they possibly are more powerful than we all imagine. And I think they are, and I think that's really, really important. And one more quote talking about values, another writer from J. Griffiths, who again was writing about hostility, about funding the arts, is because they show another value that actually it's not all about money, it's about values and why we're here. And for me, that makes it really worthwhile. I was in Edinburgh just now before I came here, and somebody said this lovely thing, particularly in relation to the asylum seekers all drowning in the Mediterranean and in Austrian lorries, that if empathy is a muscle, theatre and the arts are the gym. And I thought it was a rather wonderful thing to say, because I think that's sort of, for me, why we're all doing this. But yeah, that's all. But I think I've left tons out, because I've been so nervous of your timekeeping, so you'll have to ask me questions of things I think I've forgotten to say.